So the quest here is to explain ha'tשכ, and the reason that we are that's our objective is to understand ha'tשכ, anything, is because that's what God desires, is that we relate to Him in an intimate way. Intimate means by involving our intimate self, which is not merely our faith and surrender, but our mind and heart. So therefore, we are obligated to understand. God says, I want you to understand me to the degree that you can understand and understand what you can't understand. And therefore, the point is that He creates in such a way, although He could create completely illogically, nothing would make sense at all. But He chose to create in a way that it all does, so that we can appreciate it and appreciate Him, not creation per se, but creation as His handiwork. Therefore, we appreciate Him. So we're going through layers here, and the quest is to prove ha'tשכ, that the creative force invested in creation cannot be classical chayas, energy that God has projected and separated from Himself, but rather it must also have the quality of oir, and that He's constantly investing that energy to create. So the moshel was the flying stone, and the point is the flight of the stone. The flight of the stone is a moshel for creation, because stones don't fly, creation doesn't exist. And therefore, in order for stones to fly and for creations to exist, you need a constant force. But then he asks, okay, constant force, but that force can be separate and have an expiry date. It's God's force, and it'll last as long as the force lasts, a finite separate force that will expire and dissipate eventually. And in fact, that's true. The world only exists for 6,000 years. And nothing in the world is forever, it would seem. To that he responded, did he refute that objection? We'll answer that. He said, no, you can't say that about God, because yesterday shir, because we see God's constant interaction. We see it's a dynamic, and it illustrated that in many, many ways, macro and micro, macro and micro, that He's invested in the present sense. Space spoke about spiritual interaction, physical interaction. Without repeating the panorama of history that He painted, as well as the individual's ups and downs and dynamic relationship. So you can't say that this creation, the world is, boom, here's an energy, it's going to keep it going. Again, Harold Kushner, conservative rabbi, told you the story yesterday, one of the most best-selling books, self-help books or religious or spiritual books of all time. It's still selling. Why bad things happen to good people? And he basically argues what we're rejecting, that don't blame God because He creates nature, and nature has its nature, and there will be
bad things.
There'll be earthquakes, there'll be collisions, there will be muted genes that produce crippled children, God forbid. And that's the nature of nature. And don't blame God, and He's not involved. So we're rejecting that by saying, no, He is involved. We see that He's involved. However, now Eisvav rejects that proof. The fact that we see God's involvement, even miraculous at times, does not mean that creation is ongoing at all. That's coming Eisvav. This proof of God's patent and transparent involvement, again, personally talk about Avodas HaTefillah and Limud Torah, and spoke about history and spoke about a few broad brushstrokes. He painted life, but all of these proofs are not enough. Now, the point was that when a person throws something, He has no control of it anymore, but God still controls his world, even though he throws it metaphorically into existence. But that moshel is just because of man's limitations. What if he could run really fast and catch the stone? And he could, because now you can get into a fast-moving vehicle, the plane, that travels faster than your stone. And then you can manipulate it. And he could change the trajectory and the path of the stone, even though the energy left him, even though he could die and the stone will still fly. But if he didn't die, he could still manipulate it. So there's no raya whatsoever that creation is ongoing from God's involvement in the world. Clear? If he could, in theory, outpace the stone, he could change its course, even though the force, the velocity that carries it, is no longer connected to him whatsoever, although it comes from him. So we can apply this to God, because he can outrun the stone. So what's stopping us from saying, again, we're going the logical route here, that Seichel should understand. Why can't we say the same thing is true of creation? The creative force is separate. God's projected it. That's it. Done. And we see change. We see it's dynamic. That's not creation. That's God meddling, as it were, with a new investure. But the actual creation is on its own inertia. That God gets involved, that's an additional involvement to the force that is responsible for existence, which is now separate. But Proteus Yoisa now making our question stronger, in more detail. Where do we see the real changes? Miracles. That's clearly not within the miracles, are not within the rules of nature. And we see, in miracles and even in natural things. Even in natural things, there are changes that go one way or the other. And his point is, for sure, a miracle, we could simply argue, which is beyond nature. That's a new investment. It's a new, for sure. There's a teva, which is separate, teva energy. And now God has decided to interfere and to make a miracle. Because whatever cheshbon, we deserve it, whatever the cheshbon is. So that's obviously something new. Nature breaks marachas, literally the order, the structure of nature. So why can we argue that these miracles don't point to ongoing involvement? On the contrary, they're novel changes, novel intrusions, as it were. So nature, miracles for sure, we could argue that there's something new and don't indicate an ongoing, ever-present involvement. Furthermore, even with the changes of nature. That could be also because God steps in. That's not part of the original formula. Even changes of nature is something that God is now novelly performing. We have no proof logically that the creative force must be constant, connected to the source. So where do we see it? Again, we believe it. It's a tenet of our faith. But as you said earlier on, God wants us to understand. As we explained, use the mashal of a marriage. Can you repeat it back to me? Using the mashal of a marriage, which is the best mashal possible, because our relationship is a marriage, to explain why we have to understand all of this. Because no, using the marriage mashal.
You can't just have a marriage that's based on Kabbalah style, that I'm going to do whatever it was told. That's not true. True relationship means that there's understanding deep understanding.
You've got to have a meeting of minds, of hearts, of body, of everything. You've got to have shared experience, not just surrender. So on the one hand, it's a wonderful marriage because he totally believes in it and whatever she says goes, but that's at a very deep makif. A makif dikir level doesn't make a marriage. It makes a good servant, but not a marriage. A marriage is an evolving meeting of minds. And God says, I want you to know me. This is an intimate relationship. This, by the way, is why we're going to talk about the next year. Why Chassidus is revealed dafke at the end of Golus. Because Chassidus revealed this. Chassidus reveals that the whole purpose of everything is God's desire for a relationship. So now is the time to get to know me. Because that's really what I want. Allegiance, that's a foundation. We proved that through thick and thin for thousands of years. And moreover, it wasn't just a question of allegiance. For a long time, it was a question of, well, you're the boss, so, and I want to have a good life, so I'll do what I serve it. You know, why does the servant serve? He serves because he gets going to get fed at the end of the day. So for a long time, that's what it was. We're servants, and we get rewarded this world, the next world. There's also the element of faith and sacrifice. So it's a devoted servant, but didn't get to the marriage yet. Now at the end of Golos, after all of that has been established so deeply and painfully, frankly, now Hashem says, now get to know me. And that's where that's my whole tachlis, which is why Losid Lavai Mashiach is called Nisuyin. Matan Torah was the Kiddushin. Kiddushin, you know what Kiddushin means? You and nobody else. Okay. But Nisuyin, which is Chuppah, Yichud, and living together, that's Mesa Mashiach. And Chassidus is the bridge to that, and the foretaste of an intimate relationship with God. Understanding and probing as we're doing in this Maimon, layer by layer. Talking about Atzmos, because that's what Hashem, that's the Tachlis. And everything was Achona to them. Aside from the many other reasons why this was revealed now, it's the antidote we needed, but this is the core reason. And it's a revolution because for thousands of years, what relationship? No one said such words. There's a servant and rewarded, and that's it. Devoted servant, die for your master. The whole thing was Charva Inish, the whole thing. Why God let it go on for so long like this, only God knows. But Akaponim, the end of Golos, came the Arizal, the Hashem, the Rabbi, and now Rebbe, it says one message over and over again. Which means you, that's what the means, you. And it's his Chassidus, the Rebbe's Chassidus, this intimate knowing God is the ultimate. There's nothing more to be said. After that was my motive, nothing more to be said or understood. Experience, yeah. Now, I understood it now, that's have the real thing. But there's nothing more to be said about Kavod and Atzmos and nothing. Take this, my motive, Mesichas, and unpack them, unravel them from them. It's a final statement. But there was a book that came out. You might be interested in this. I think I have it in the shelf somewhere. Someone argues the end of science, a preeminent scientist, just saying that the great breakthroughs have all happened. They just tweak it and tweak and tweak it. And he argues like there can't be more. Whatever, it's all book this thick. That mirrors what we're saying exactly now. That is my modim. So this is it now. Just go deeper and apply it and internalize it. Huh? It's absolutely true. No, there's been no fundamental. There's been give me in any area in science where it's been like discovery of gravity. No, you're not getting my point. Tweak, yeah, tweak, and unpack it and AI and but all the fundamental building blocks of computer and AI, it's all been there now for 50 years since quantum physics and even earlier. And for that matter, there's no new idea. There is not even a new idea in politics. There's no new music. There's no new art form. There's been nothing new for at least 50 years. They're regurgitating the old stuff and just repackaging it. Huh?
His father got a.
Can't hear you.
His father.
Your father, yeah.
Well, my father.
Your father.
No, he was in he was in there years, like a long time ago.
In like the 70s, he got a. In the 80s, he got a PhD or something in AI.
Yeah, no, it's really, it's the iPhone. Practically speaking, it changes, but it's really there's no new discovery. New discovery. It hasn't been in 50 years.
Well, there could be new inventions, but it's based on.
It's based on discovery. There's a
Yeah.
million inventions. That's based on the core Nakudas. The atom was a big discovery. I mean, the 50s, the big quantum physics and atomic discoveries correspond with Rebbe's Nasias. I told you, Zalman, someone's got to do this. Someone's got to show from the Baal Shem Tov, even from Nar Yizal, till this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha is about the war, the flood, the famous Zoya. The 6th century, the 6th millennium would be explosion of knowledge. The water from the heaven and from the great deep, the abyss, the great deep would open up. And that's science, the big breakthroughs in science and in Gilead, Pnimis HaTorah. But the study would be a fascinating study to show the parallels of the ideas of Moshe Tov and what was discovered in science there. And the Rebbe is quantum physics. It's the 50s, 40s. The atom, that's the really big breakthrough, was the discovery of the atom. That's changed everything. And that's essence. Atom is relative essence, but even within essence, now a whole new world in quantum physics opens up. It's almost spiritual. Communication faster than the speed of light and completely breaks the mold of everything we understood of reality till now. I'm talking really just with the barest knowledge what I'm talking about, but I know what I'm saying is so. Akoponim, and that parallels the Rebbe's Chassidus and the Rebbe's revolution on so many levels. Who could have imagined after Auschwitz that there be a revival of Jewish faith and observance and tshuva, people coming back after Auschwitz? God's dead. There's a famous book, God Died in Auschwitz. Can't be a God after Auschwitz. 2 million children, 6 million. And yet, impossible. The whole tshuva movement. And as I told you many times, I led the march on the living. And for most of them, the most inspiring moment was the Kaddish in Auschwitz, or the Kaddish at the mass grave. That's inspiring. That's the one place we forget it, walk away, can't be a God. No, that's where he finds him. That's where the kids moved. I want to start putting on film. This is not logical. But the Rebbe, this is etzim. This is the etzim of a Yid. And the Rebbe stirs this etzim, because that's the Rebbe's union. That's what he is, atzmi. Yechid HaKlolis, before Mashiach comes, the Gilead Pnimis HaTorah, very atzmizdika level. After etzim, there's nothing more to say. Just appreciate it, analyze it, and study it, and apply it, and apply it, and apply it. And new inventions. But all based on what? On the discovery of etzim. Let's go a little further. But the matter is as follows. Everybody has the place. Yeah? I'm going to suggest at the beginning of the shir, we put a little plate. Everybody puts their phones in the phone, like in the restaurants. The first guy that takes the phone has to pay for the meal. The first guy that takes their phone has to learn the Maamar by heart. Okay. It's also going to be, I'm just going to tell you now. What's that?
I'd rather pay for the meal.
You'd rather learn the Maamar?
I'd rather pay for the meal.
Then learn the Maamar. You mean you'll pay for the Fabrengen or something? You what?
I'm just threatening to go to Zoom.
Oh, no, Chas v'shalom, you're into a good thing. Here physically is different for you and for me. So the matter is, this is from where? From Samach, whatever, Samach Dalet. So where do we see in Seichel We must say that the creative force is constantly attached to the infinite creator, and it's not a finite expiry date energy invested in creation with all of the complex laws that would go along with that. What's the raya? Answer: the constancy of the world. We see infinite in creation. We see eternity in creation. How so? It's both true of the hosts of terra firma, of the land. Shem kayomim b'min, the species continues forever. There's an eternal, infinite birth, the miracle of birth that's in nature, flora and fauna, is indicative of an infinite power, an infinite constant presence. And certainly we talk about the celestial beings. They are still around, not just the species, the sun, the moon, planets, thousands of years still around. Now, unchanging. And I know there's a question that science says that the sun is getting slowly weaker and not changing. Basically, the answer to that. But here, the position is that it's unchanging. We say every Shabbos and davening that the heavens relate the glory of God. And furthermore, the pasuk says, so in Yeshayasum, raise your eyes heavenwards. And see who creates all of this. He takes out literally in number their hosts, the numbers of stars that they merge. We see them, they merge at night. Because of his great strength, his words for strength. And amitz koyach. Ishle nedar, nobody is missing, nobody meaning no celestial being. Every star and planet endures, unchanging, as far as the planet is concerned, eternally. That's not the nature of the planet itself, the star. The nature of nature is to decay, to break down. Something that's created and not there forever. He says, nothing can make itself. We would expect that over time it weakens and erodes. The whole hoivet is this is a principle of logic. The whole hoivet nifsit, every present then gives way and is gone and nifsit literally becomes lost. It's not simply that they should potentially become over time lost. Lost means decay, break down, disappear. We would expect, in observing it, that they actually gradually erode and diminish. That's the word, diminish. You do aklal, as is known the principle. This is from the Rambam. It's an interesting principle. Shekola efshari b'min, anything that's possible in a species, it's impossible that the end it doesn't happen. Anything possible in a species, whatever, is going to be materialized. If it could happen, then given enough time, it will happen. So he's saying what could happen to it, just looking at this physical entity, is that it diminishes. And if it could diminish, then it will diminish. Since we see they did not diminish, they remain in their kiyum, their original form. When it comes to earthly creatures, it's not the actual creature, but it's the species. And the hosts of heaven, the individual entity remains, the planets remain unchanging. As the Shalmi says, Rashi brings us a chumash. Allah posek Eile told it's a Shemayim v'aretz behi borom. These are the chronicles of heaven and earth when he created them. When he created them, these are the chronicles of heaven and earth. What's the behi borom? What's that word adding? Says the Shalmi, the point of the posek is Shem chazokim kayem borom. that there's just as strong and in force and as the day they were created. This is a clear indication that the creative force is not separate, God forbid. Is still connected, and therefore that grants this eternal property to finite create existence. Because the life force that creates, it's connected to the source. That's what gives it its eternal existence. And that's why creation is created in such a way that it does not diminish. Which would not be. If the source was separated from God and now it's finite, it would produce a finite existence, which would not just expire at the end, but over time diminish. As there should be changes. That creation would not be the same it was at the outset when that energy was first invested. Close to the source. The way it is at the end, thousands of years later. It's already now, the energy is now over time become physically, over time, distant from the source. Therefore, we should observe a difference. The world at the beginning of its history to the way it is later. There should be a weakening of creation. That's what we mean by diminishing. That would continue to diminish. We'd expect to find that. Al-Derech is a very sobering statement. The Bechai is a famous Pirish and Chumash. He writes, a child, as soon as he's born, begins to literally to dry out, to diminish. Even though we get, he's saying that even though on the one hand we're growing and get bigger and stronger, on another level we're losing that vitality. It's drying out literally, and we would expect that to be true of all of existence, and therefore, but it's not. So what? It's true the individual human being dies, but as he pointed before, the species continues undiminished. And moreover, it's not like that the species that it produces in subsequent generations is a weaker kind of person. Not. So all this points to, let's conclude, it's because the creative force is attached to its source, which is infinite and unchanging, and that grants creation that very same phenomena. And that's why creation is as strong and as intense and as vital, the vitality, as the day was created. The law you have said those without getting weakening. Now he's going to address, but the Gemara says that was a whole contention that there is an expiry date. The year the 6,000th year, that he will address, God willing, on the next year.